Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by Allstate and the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust.
Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Michael Puente, reporter with WBEZ Chicago. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, Chicago's Latino population has grown significantly over the last decade, and the City Council's Latino caucus wants a ward map of Chicago that reflects the growth. We'll take a look at what that could mean for the city's future. The pandemic has created chaos in the global supply chain, leaving consumers of imported goods scrambling to find their favorites. And a new initiative in suburban Illinois involves training advocates to educate immigrants about their health care rights.
They are using our coffee, but we are not receiving money.
And a Chicago coffee roaster that cuts out the middleman between the coffee farm and your morning cup. First off tonight, Chicago's racial makeup is often described as roughly a third white, a third black, and a third Latino. And while those approximations still remain broadly true, the 2020 census results have revealed shifts in the proportions. From 2010 to 2020, the Latino population rose 5%, adding more than 40,000 residents. Chicago's Asian American population rose 31% and now represents nearly 7% of the city's population. In the same time period, the black population dropped by 10% with a loss of nearly 85,000 residents. Now, older people are battling over how to fairly reflect the city's evolving racial makeup and how the borders of its 50 wards are drawn and how that new map will affect the balance of power over the next decade. Joining us now with more are Jaime Dominguez, Associate Professor of Political Science at Northwestern University, Silvia Puente, President and CEO of the Latino Policy Forum, and Jackie Serrato, Editor-in-Chief of Southside Weekly. Thank you all of you for joining us here today on Latino Voices.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Well, we'll start off with Silvia Puente. And Silvia, we're not related, but how could more Latino representation in Chicago government manifest in political agendas and priorities, and what issues might rise to the top?
Really good question. I think two things. Obviously, with the demographic growth of the Latino population in the city of Chicago, we do expect to see an increase in the number of wards with a Latino majority population in which Latinos will be able to elect the alderperson of their choice. And I think with certainly that growing political representation in our city council, but I would have to say, Michael, also with just increased organization, organizing within the Latino community, some of the key issues of concern to the Latino community are being lifted up through the Illinois Latino Agenda, for example, which is a coalition that my organization has helped to foster. Now, there are numerous issues such as, do we have a proportionate number of individuals in the mayor's office and in all the different city agencies, leading city agencies that are Latino? As we look at the rollout of the American Rescue Plan dollars, will we see equitable investment in the Latino community? And I could go on, but I would say that it is in tandem with our elected officials as well as our community voices that the issues of concern around equity for the Latino community will be presented to the mayor and that we'll work collectively to achieve.
Now, Jackie Serrato, the Latino caucus proposed a ward remap that reduces the number of majority black wards by 2 and increases the number of Latino majority wards by 2. Is this ward level representation something that Chicagoans want, or is this a power grab by the Latino caucus?
Well, I think if we're looking at the data and we want, Latinx constituents to be properly represented, then I do believe that there needs to be an additional 1 or 2 Latinx majority wards. Mayor Lori Lightfoot campaigned on a promise that she would create an independent commission to draw new ward boundaries to coincide with the 2020 census, but unfortunately that hasn't happened. She also didn't win any wards, any black wards during the election. So whether those communities are a priority for her has been a question throughout her entire administration. So I believe that the Black and the Latino caucuses are going to have to work together to figure it out. And I mean, there has been some precedent of that happening with legislation around policing and increased investment in Black and Brown communities. We've also seen a lot of collaboration within the Democratic Socialist Caucus, which is made up of both Latinx and Black alder people, right? So I do think there is room for both communities to work with each other. But we have definitely seen a trend of out-migration in the Black community throughout Chicago. And, you know, it's due to many factors, including, you know, the lack of well-paying jobs and other opportunities, rising property taxes, and gun violence. But there has also been an out-migration of Latinx people from traditionally Latinx communities, and that is due to gentrification and some of these other factors that are also driving out Black residents. So I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of the issues that matter to both communities, and it is my hope that both of them work together.
Now, Jaime Dominguez, what could a reshuffling of ward boundaries result in for those constituents?
Well, first I'd like to just put this whole issue of Latino political power, because I think that's what we're all talking about here. And I think that, you know, with we're talking about political power, I think we need to talk about it along three fronts, right? So there's a representation perspective, which is both symbolic, which is important because that sets up momentum for the substantive aspect of representation. But more importantly, I think it also leads to two more important concepts in this discussion, and that is agency. Right, without the representation, it's very difficult to have agency. So I think it's important for the Latino community to have that, right? And government, whether it's the mayor's office, whether it's the city council, whether it's other city agencies, boards and commissions, should reflect that. And that's also important because an extension of agency is also the ability to advocate. Silva Puente and others have been doing a tremendous job on that front. And so we got to make sure that we keep that momentum going. But one thing I also want to mention is that we talk about this issue of representation, but you know, every point has two sides. So while we may be talking about Latino representation, we also need to talk about underrepresentation, that is. We also need to talk about the overrepresentation also, right, of other groups. And so we know that politics is difficult, particularly in a place like Chicago that's officially a tripart city, right? That there's always going to be bargaining, people have to bargain and there has to be concessions. Now, does that mean there's going to be, you know, parity across the board? Always? No, of course not. However, we should, at least as a city, from a governance perspective, right, that the numbers in the population should reflect those actors, right, that play an important role in setting the policy agenda. But more importantly, those that actually implement the policy agenda, because I think that's also important, right? It's not about just talking about policy, but actually putting it in place. So I think that we're going to see a lot of that over the next few years. And one thing also we need to mention is that maybe the next decennial census, but we're going to, you know, Latinos are about 40,000 residents away from becoming the actual majority in the city. So although we always talk about this representation issue as a Black and Latino, we also need to bring whites into this conversation as well, because we need to reframe that conversation, because it's not about just Blacks and Latinos, but it's also whites have to play a critical role in this, and also in terms of their power, right? There has to be concessions on that front. So it's important that we keep that perspective.
Well, this segment was going to go fast. Go ahead.
It's whites and Asians. And one of the things that I want to lift up, Michael, if it's okay, is also understand that the electorate in Chicago in general has gotten much more sophisticated. We now have Blacks representing districts that are not majority Black and Latinos representing districts that are not majority Latino. So it is this both and how any person can represent a district if it is in alignment with the needs of the residents of that district. Yes, it still can be largely driven along racial and ethnic lines, but it's important to note that it is no longer exclusively driven along the lines of race and ethnicity.
Well, Jackie, we only got a few more seconds. We saw some instances in the past couple of years of tension between Black and Latino communities in Chicago. Do you think a change in the balance of Black majority and Latino majority wards could exacerbate that tension? And we only have a few minutes, few seconds.
I think there is less of a tension among the younger generations. We've seen a lot of groups and organizations from both communities working together over the past 1 or 2 years and even longer than that. But much of the growth of the Latinx population in Chicago has been seen in the Southwest side, where we've seen a lot of white flight in the last 10 or 15 years. These were communities that were at one time inhabited by Polish families, right? And this tends to happen when Latinx people move into majority white neighborhoods. They have been moving out. But that means that the Latinx demographic is really growing in the Southwest side, and it is expanding into communities that, you know, were traditionally Black, like West Englewood. So it is definitely my hope that both communities, you know, continue to work together because, again, as I said earlier, there's a lot of issues that are intersectional to both.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Our thanks to Jaime Dominguez, Sylvia Puente, and Jackie Serrato.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
The Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights recently announced the launch of its Immigrant Health Academy. The initiative's goal is to train community leaders in suburban areas with high immigrant populations to inform immigrants about their health care rights and correct misconceptions about access to care. Jose Vera, executive director of the partner organization Southwest Suburban Immigrant Project, says ensuring immigrant communities understand their rights to health care is especially critical as residents are still navigating the COVID pandemic.
During the pandemic it became much more evident that this was such a huge need, especially as many of our families were interacting with hospitals. Our hope is that when folks show up at a hospital or when they're seeking healthcare in general, they know like what their top rights are, right? And that includes getting access to someone that speaks the language that you feel comfortable with, knowing that, you know, if you're seeking assistance at the hospital, that you have the right to getting financial assistance after the fact, and you know, just basic information like that might be very common for some of us, but not for all of us. So we do hope other cities, you know, replicate some of this, because we believe that, you know, healthcare is a human right. So, you know, everybody needs access to it.
You can learn more about the Immigrant Health Academy on our website. Up next, what disruptions in global supply chains could mean for some of your favorite imported items. As the holiday season nears and families across the country prepare to observe the traditions that make their celebration special, the state of the global supply chain has been thrust into the spotlight. The COVID-19 pandemic is wreaking havoc on the way goods are not only produced, but how they are moved around the world. And as backups at ports mount and leave store shelves with scant supply, folks in the U.S. are scrambling to find the items they rely on to make the season bright. Joining us now are Maciek Novak, interim dean at Loyola University's Chicago Quinlan School of Business, and Cesar Romero, manager of operations at El Condor store in Logan Square. Welcome both of you to Latino Voices.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Cesar, we'll start with you. Your store, El Condor, sells pan Latin American groceries and other items. How have the supply chain disruptions affect your business over, say, the last 2 years?
The last 2 years, we've definitely seen a shortage in glass containers, and that's led to drink bottles made of glass and pepper pastes, which is a big hit within the Peruvian and Ecuadorian community. It's a great seasoning, and just that, to find those products, it's been extreme difficulty to find. And now through containers are taking a lot longer to get to from point of origin to Chicago. Before it used to take 3 to 4 weeks, but now it's even 2-3 months. Considering that the price for freight forwarding and releasing it has at the very least tripled or quadrupled.
Wow.
And that has definitely spilled onto us, and considering raising prices. We always thought ourselves as a mom and pop shop, and the prices have always been modest. But now it's really forcing our hands to consider raising prices too. So we are just considering that the prices are now starting to hit us, and that's starting to hit the consumer customers, which is not ideal, but it's the way the world is changing.
Well, Cesar, just stay on you for a second. When you have to raise prices, how does that really affect your business? Do you often see customers maybe instead of going to you, just try to hit up big box stores as a result?
And that's the thing. That's a fine line. That's something we all ponder and consider when raising prices. Do we want to raise it to a point where other customers are going to want to be unattracted to it and then reach another competitor or whatever? Like I said, we've always saw ourselves as the more affordable, modest grocery store. Whenever we do raise prices, it's never going to be dramatically more expensive. The customers do notice it, and sometimes they do start buying by a bigger bulk. But whatever the case is, we do not try to. We're trying to balance the books out enough where the customers won't completely handle the pain of it.
Well, Dean Novak, can you give us an overview on what's causing these disruptions and their effect on imported goods in the U.S.?
Sure. Obviously, the pandemic, but I think at this point, the biggest factor is labor shortage. There's just not enough people who are available, whether it's truck drivers, port personnel, warehouse personnel, to move all of these containers. As we see, the labor market is doing really well right now. So these aren't necessarily the most high-end jobs, and people are finding other employment that might be more preferable. So ultimately, we don't have there's enough volume of goods coming in without the number of people to move all that product through the network.
And what do you see as the long-term outlook for these disruptions, Dean Novak?
I think we'll see, hopefully, as we move past the holiday season, there should be somewhat of a decrease in the volumes that we're seeing. So that will obviously help. But I think that's a short-term fix. Long-term, it's really we're going to need more people to come back to the industry, and that may be increasing wages in those different areas, like I said, with truck drivers, warehouse personnel, to attract more people, and that the market, you would imagine, will balance out eventually. If there is such a demand, these companies are going to have to increase their wages to attract more personnel. So I would expect to see that, but that takes months. It's not days, it's not weeks. It's going to be probably, I would say it's mid-year next year at best, where we start to see maybe a return to normalcy.
Now, Cesar, are there particular products that are experiencing shortages, and how have you adjusted your operations?
A lot of bottled drinks made of glass has been an extreme shortage. Mineral water, a particular brand called Wheatig, which is a big popular brand for Ecuadorians and Peruvians. And we've adjusted just by trying to see what other sources have been selling them. Maybe not in particularly the same packaging. Like I said, glass is what the consumer and the clients in the community know and recognize and like. So when you introduce something like plastic, we pretty much try to give them what they want and assure them that anytime they ask if where's glass product, or let them know that it's coming. We're transparent. We're letting them know we're just trying to adjust and grab whatever sources we can for importation of whatever goods. Add sodas and glass containers, like I said earlier, pastes. Paste is a huge thing for seasoning. Mm-hmm. So anything made of glass, I would say. Or frozen goods.
Let me ask you this, but is there anything in the products that you're having that you're short supply? Can they be replaced with an American-made product, or no way? It has to come from that company, that country.
It depends on the situation. If it's since we also distribution, we do sell to a lot of restaurants, South American restaurants within Chicago. The restaurants are a little more lenient because the product itself, the name brand, doesn't reach the clients. So whatever product they get, they're going to do with it and cook with it. But if it's like we're selling to, let's say, a Cermak or another Latino store, they're more particular of what products they get. So we try to reserve certain name brands for a certain clientele. But if it's a restaurant, they're a little more lenient on that. But whatever the case, we do try to deliver whatever the clients are most comfortable with.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there. Our thanks to Malchek Novak and Cesar Romero.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As the weather starts to turn chillier and the days grayer, many Chicagoans rely on coffee to breathe in some daily sunshine, and we're not alone. Americans spend more than $5 billion on coffee every year. But the people who grow the beans around the world don't always benefit from the wealth their product creates. A local coffee roaster aims to bring those beans directly to your cup through a family connection. Producer Erica Gunderson has the story.
When I saw a hot cup of coffee, it reminded me of my grandpas because they always drink the hot coffee and they don't care if it was in the morning or in the afternoon. It was just a hot coffee to have a conversation and share time together. So that's what coffee means to me.
Elmer Fajardo was just 17 when he made the trek from his family's farm in Guatemala to Chicago in 2011.
The name of my village is Aldea Valle de Jesus. I remember that we didn't even have like electricity until I was like 8 years old. My grandpa, he used to grow a lot of not only coffee, but he used to grow tobacco, corn, beans, sugar cane.
Today, Fajardo's business Anticonquista Cafe sells locally roasted beans from the Fajardo farm. But when he came to Chicago, Fajardo was just hoping to find work that would allow him to send money home and keep the farm afloat. It was in Chicago's coffee shops that Fajardo says he had a wake-up call.
When I came here in 2011, and I saw there the prices of coffee in my town, and when I went to those fancy places to drink, when I saw the prices there is something wrong because they are using our coffee, but we are not receiving money. They have been selling this coffee for this expensive price, right?
Fajardo says that in Latin America, even cooperative farming models often end up undercompensating farmers for their beans.
And that's how this multinational corporation, they say, these people own us, their coffee. We already have their coffee in advance, right? And that means that these people, even if the price is high, they are not going to receive more money because they already own their coffee to these multinational corporations.
In 2019, Fajardo and his wife, Lauren Reese, developed a business model that cuts out the middleman between farmers and consumers.
It's coming directly from my husband Elmer's farm, and I work directly with his brother, my brother-in-law, Emilio, and we basically talk every day. Especially when it's during the harvest season. I am his point person with helping sort of steward the coffee from the farm all the way up here to Chicago.
Pues con el café que se prepara para mandar ahí, hay que cortarlo, seleccionarlo en el corte, despulparlo, se lava, se seca, se puntella y de ahí se trilla. Y nuevamente se vuelve a clasificar para mandarlo para ahí.
Once the beans have made their own trek from Central America to Chicago, they're roasted here in small batches. They sell their coffee beans by the bag and brewed coffee on their website and at farmers markets via their coffee bike.
There are so many coffee shops, but not like what they're doing, which is pretty amazing, that they have a direct line to the farm, that it's a family business. That drew me in because I love a good story. So the story kind of sells the product, and then the product just delights you.
Reese says their ultimate goal is to open their own storefront that keeps the needs of the immigrant community in mind.
I don't really see cafes open in the evening when working people are more available. And so for us to be able to create this space that's open in the evenings, to be able to support that with the immigrant community is definitely a goal for us.
And Fajardo says that being able to share his family's coffee with Chicagoans has helped make this city his second home.
There is a lot of nice people in Chicago, a lot of Latino people in Chicago that I have been receiving my coffee with love, and that's what that means for me because it's just something of my family.
For Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
The farmers market season has wrapped up in Chicago, but Anticonquista will be at the indoor Logan Square Farmers Market over the winter. You can find more information on our website. And that's our show for this weekend. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Latino Voices and Black Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And you can catch my reporting on 91.5 FM WBEZ. Next week on Latino Voices, my friend Alex Hernandez with Univision will be here in the host chair. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Michael Puente. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm representing dozens of families in the crash of a Boeing 737 MAX 8 jet. Mr. Clifford is the lead counsel in litigation in federal court in Chicago.